order. Welcome to the meeting in May. Happy May Day. We are just having a continuation of our conversation from the facilities planning from the last month's work session after receiving a lot of public input on several different projects that we've been working on. So the admin team has been doing a good job of kind of sorting through that and looking at what might be possible, what makes sense, what other options that we have. And so I think they're here today to share with us some of the tweaks that they've made. Go ahead.
So we have a few slides. Some of it's familiar. We have kind of started to narrow in now on what we think some preferred options are going to be. Just as a reminder, we're not voting on anything today. We can still continue to take feedback, but we've really appreciated the comments that we've gotten and the people who came to some of the forums that we held. It's been helpful, and these are always decisions that affect the daily grind. And those were some of the comments that we got about, the realities of logistics and pickup drop off and students staying with their cohorts of students that they've come up through elementary and into middle and high school. And so, as we talk about it, I know the mental model that I think of is all of the roads that we now have that lead to proficiency in 2 languages. And we have one road that's been Sonia Sotomayor that's kind of a single superhighway with immersion. And then we added 2 new roads that are the 2-way immersion. And now what we want to do is kind of make it a seamless interchange for then how those programs continue to thrive up into middle school and into high school. And so that's been the goal as we've tried to review this. Alongside of that, of course, we also have some of these other related projects that some things need to be decided now. Some things maybe we'll recommend holding off on a little bit as we envision the Whittier project and what that does to kind of some of the shift there as we've seen that work happen around our new elementary school on the north side, and as we've done Jefferson and new buildings, Ben Rifle and all those. We have to shift things around a little bit to make our student populations reflect what that area can handle in the new buildings as they come online. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Nold to kind of go through what's maybe the same and what might look a little different.
Good afternoon, and we will go through and give you some updates in each of the different areas and then kind of give you a little bit of a look of what's upcoming. So obviously the purpose today, this will be the 3rd update that we go through. We had some informational meetings last fall, not counting those because we really got more specific with some of the intentions and the proposals as we started 3 meetings ago. So going through with this 3rd update, first of all, just looking a little bit at the timeline as you go through this. So this meeting, we started with the March 6th one with the first information and then went through with the community feedback on Let's Talk with each of those different types of proposals. And then we had 5 community listening sessions, the board work session again, April 3rd, today's session, May 1st. And then looking at, if need be, additional information that would be shared with you, especially if there's any types of questions or things that we need to come back with additional information. Looking at June 5th, and then vote at the regular school board meeting June 10th on any of the things that we'd need to have a board vote on. And so that's kind of a timeline to make sure that we're keeping people informed and making sure people have opportunities to be able to speak with the board or share any of their type of input. So that's the timeline that we've been working off of. Obviously, we look at that end date that we've talked about before with December 1st being that final date. That's when open enrollment occurs and people have to know their options well before that. But hopefully with that June 10th goal in mind, that gets us to our deadline well in advance of that. Starting here, we're just looking at, and you knew from the last meeting that we had, the Marcelo Lebeau Elementary School. And so we'll talk about that first. When we look at that area, we talked about the boundaries. So that was one of the first things that we went through, the boundaries it would be for that new elementary, the new elementary being Marcelo Lebeau. That would open in 2025. That boundary part that you can see, I'll go back to that once more, but the boundary part that you can see there, there has been no input that we have received to the contrary of that. And so we feel very good that that boundary that we've laid out there will fit well for that new elementary school. It'll take some time, obviously, for it to grow into be full. but our intention is not to have it full right away because we're gonna have a lot of growth in that area. And so when we look at that, it is really to look at the areas that we have set aside there. It's gonna take portions of Renberg and Hawthorne and Hayward. And our preferred option for that is to move forward with the plan as developed. So at each one of these, you'll kind of see as we go through, we will give you just a little bit of input right now where we're at, especially after the feedback sessions, the Let's Talk information, and other conversations we've had as to where we're at right now and what we would have as our preferred option. Obviously, you as a board in an area like this can choose to do something different, but right now it has seemed that our feedback with the boundaries for the new elementary opening in 2025, Marcelo Lebeau Elementary School, has been well received, and that's what we intend to continue to move forward with that option. Any questions on the elementary school in that boundary area? Okay. Our next area that we look at is really the Cleveland Whittier. We talked about that and went through some of the updates on potentially moving Cleveland to the Whittier area. And we had some listening sessions on that, conversations that we've had as well on that. You can see there on the map where that area is. It's the Cleveland Elementary School attendance area. And we talked about moving that into Whittier for the middle school. Currently, it's in the Ben Rifle Middle School. Had some great feedback and conversations with some of our parents on that. What we decided on that or looked at, our original option on that was to move that for the fall of 2025 to try to have a lot of those changes occur at the same time. And so our original option that we looked at, that we went out with information to seek on that, is to move that in the fall of 2025, where that would impact about 172 students going from Ben Rifle Middle School to Whittier Middle School. With the feedback and things like that, we've looked at a new option based on the feedback and planning, and we're looking at the fall of 2030. We'd look at this option for potential fall of 2030 just because that would be in the opening of the new Whittier Middle School. And what we can look at it then is maybe some additional opportunities would be allocated to the new Whittier building, and look at those things that would make that very advantageous. We would have a new school setting. There could be some other opportunities with programming that could be afforded at that building. And to be able to look at that possibly instead of 2025, push that to 2030. At that time, we're probably looking at the growth that would occur around that Ben Rifle area and Rosa Parks area to be, filling it at a little quicker pace. We feel fairly comfortable that we do have a space available to still accommodate that through the next 5 years. And so looking to move that, so the preferred option that we're looking at this point in time after the feedback and the information that we've taken is to really set that for the fall of 2030. Questions on that at all?
Will that have any impact, on enrollment at Ben Rifle over the next 5 years?
Yep, and we'll talk a little bit about that. It'll come up with the next section. Great question. We do feel fairly comfortable because this will have to coincide a little bit with a couple other things. But we do feel fairly comfortable. It'll keep Ben Rifle right at that, just under 1,000, which we try to keep all our middle schools there. We have only one middle school that's above that. That's still Memorial, but Memorial has come from 1,300 down to 1,100 or so right now. So that number continues to go down just like we were anticipating and hoped it would. And our other middle schools stay right about that point. The two that are well below that right now would be George McGovern and Whittier. And so that's why we looked that we could be able to afford that space for probably another 5 years, and that might be the extent of it.
And this is one thing, it's not dependent upon Whittier being rebuilt, and so if we need to pivot in another year or two, we still could do that. And so I think we all know this is a possibility, but it's always good when you have kind of a natural transition point with a new building that maybe that just makes more sense, unless we start to bust out at the seams somewhere.
Yep. And so we still have that in play, that we could, if need be, at a point in time, if it just seems after 3 years, it's the number of homes and multifamily housing units have increased in that area, we can still go back to that option. But right now, with some of the plans we have in place, we would not be called upon to need to do that in 2025. It seemed like a good transition when you're talking across the district with other changes, but it isn't a necessity. Okay. The next area that we will go into is the Spanish immersion.
All right.
As Dr. Nold said, we talked, had listening sessions and took the feedback through Let's Talk, and we came up with a couple other options for that Spanish immersion program, so we'll go through those today. Again, our original proposal was to have our middle schools feed into 2 different sites, Ben Rifle and Edison, for our, starting in the fall of 2025 with our Spanish immersion students. Again, that Spanish immersion expansion, we look at our 3 different programs that we have. Our models for language, our one-way immersion at Sonia Sotomayor, and then our second instructional model, that two-way immersion at Hayward and Rosa Parks. And then we know we have biliteracy offerings in all our high schools, which is Spanish for Spanish speakers. At our middle school level, we also add our heritage speakers in, currently at Edison when there's space available. Knowing that when we move to a second or third site for middle school, we'll have multiple seats open, and that will provide opportunities for more heritage speakers to be blended into that model. So as we look at that, option 1 was the option that was proposed, and we went out and had listening sessions, which opened up a one-way stream at Marcella LeBeau and at Rosa Parks, and then the middle school option was at Edison and Ben Rifle. And we go through the pros and cons of that, and the pros and cons of option 1. You know, it opens up more seats for the one-way immersion program by adding 2 one-way streams at a couple elementaries. At middle school, we would have 2 middle school sites, and the pro for that is that we would have full teams of students at both those sites. The con is that the two-way immersion students to be bused into Edison would cause a little more difficulty, cost for the district, but also ensuring that we offer that programming for those students and making sure that they can continue on in their program just creates another challenge. So that's option 1, and again, that was as proposed. Option 2, so we look at option 2, and option 2 is a new option. Option 2 would eliminate the one-way stream of Spanish immersion at Marcella LeBeau Elementary and keep it at just a one-way stream at Rosa Parks. And the benefit there is we can share resources. We already have the library established at Rosa Parks. They could collaborate with their team there. But then we would, when we look at middle school, we would add George McGovern into the mix. So we would have Edison. Students that are at Rosa Parks would naturally go to Ben Rifle, their HAC, and then Hayward would go to George McGovern. And that would provide them that same seamless stream going on to their middle school. And again, the pros and cons, as I said, it opens a one-way stream at Rosa Parks, again, sharing resources. Middle school supports that two-way immersion going to their home attendance center, and it reduces the need for that two-way busing into Edison. And the con for that is it increases the staffing needs by adding a team at a third middle school. And we have one more option for consideration. So option 3 is no additional elementary programming. So keep it as is, just at Sonia Sotomayor. Middle school expansion would be just as proposed in option 2. So Edison Middle School, and then Ben Rifle and George McGovern. And those would be half teams or a little more than half teams because we could add anybody from Sonia could go to any 3 of the programs, okay, as space is available. And then also heritage speakers could join in at both East and West side and at Edison also, as they do now. So the next slide, the pros and cons of the third option. It reduces the number of staff needed at the elementary level because there's no expansion. It supports the programming across the district to allow the two-way immersion students to go to their HAC, just really a seamless transition for them. The con is it reduces 50 students per year into the Spanish immersion program by eliminating the 2 one-way streams, and it creates scheduling challenges with half team at middle schools. So those are some of the cons on that.
And clarify the 50 students, just so that's crystal clear.
So if we would have added the one-way stream at Marcella LeBeau and the one-way stream at Rosa Parks, that would have been 50 additional students in that one-way immersion programming, which we know we have a waiting list. And that's what we were trying to help support by adding those one-way streams, is providing that opportunity to more families in the district.
Right, we're not decreasing the
We
program.
are not
Just wanna make
decreasing.
sure
No,
that's
I appreciate your
And that
clarification.
would be 2 sections then, per school or 1 school, depending on the option. When you say 50 students,
Correct. If
sections.
like option 1 was 25 at Marcella, 25 at Rosa. Option 2 was just Rosa Parks, so that would have been 25 students, correct. Thanks for the clarification. So, and the last slide just compares the options and the staffing needs. I forget that we're operating 2 different computers here. There we go. Option 1, 2, and 3 really clarifies the staffing needs between the 3 options. And so you can see option 1 as proposed was 15 staff with the growth of all the programs would be needed for Spanish immersion. Option 2 is at 15 staff, and option 3 is 12 staff because we're not adding the additional one-way stream for the elementary programming. And as with our other slides, we have a preferred option, and the preferred option would be option 3 for your consideration. Any questions?
I'll just say I appreciate all the conversations that we've had, because I think this is it's a big decision, and there's a lot of parents and a lot of community members who are invested in this. I appreciate that we are trying to remove as many barriers as we can for our two-way students, because they've already invested so much time at the elementary level that it would really be a shame if they didn't continue on. And so by allowing them to just get on that same bus with their peers and go with them, I think is a really great option. And then also, spreading it out so that logistically people have choices. And so I know we had talked about, like you mentioned, if you are, I'm an East Sider and I'm close to Rosa Parks, if I didn't want to drive to Edison, I could choose Ben Rifle. And if you are currently a two-way immersion family, but you're in the Edison home attendance area, you could also choose Edison. So there will still be a nice, I think, mixing in some ways, and it'll still give, I think, a lot of students the opportunity to continue with the least number of barriers to do so.
We really did want to look at what's best for kids. And again, like you said, if I can just ensure I can continue on, and I really believe if I'm at a two-way immersion site, that just streamlines the process for them. And after we handed out all those seals of bilateral, it's very exciting, so.
The other thing that I would add is, I know came up in several meetings, was regarding teachers. And I think we're all about wanting quality teachers over quantity of teachers. And so we have really great teachers, and we have a really great intern program that is heavily supported and very appreciated. Mm-hmm. And so I think my only suggestion would be, whether it's to the district or parents or whoever, is that we have a great feeder program for our elementary school for teachers, because we have interns in our elementary school. And so one of our challenges is trying to find high school teachers that are content specific. And so if we could somehow get a feeder program for our high school teachers, I think that would be super helpful. By having a high school intern, or at least somebody that spends some time to try to generate some of that interest. Again, we've talked about the many benefits of how they transition here as already living here and then coming back, and what an easy thing that is. And so getting good quality staff that we know already is super helpful. So as we continue to support that, I think that I'd love to see that become a priority.
Thank you.
I will say that if you look at programs in many other places, the biggest challenge is always staffing. And staffing over time, you can sometimes get things up and running, and then you have trouble continuing. And this district has done such a good job of stabilizing this program as it's grown. And, we did get to see the fruits of that labor today in that seal of biliteracy. And our state is, I believe it was the last state in the nation to recognize the global seal of biliteracy. And so this district was way ahead of its time in establishing this program. And now that it is so healthy, We want to make sure that we can keep what we have as well as, slowly but surely growing and expanding. And I think, here again, depending on what the next few years do in the growth of a program, you'll have to reevaluate at some point. If it needs to expand, then it, can maybe do that right where it is, or at that point, then you do have to look at additional sites. And I know some of our high schools would like to start building out options, and as the program grows, it helps the program grow. And so just the recognition of it, and I think students will recognize it a little bit differently as the recognition for that accomplishment comes online. So it's good to be thinking about what's the next leg of the journey, but that may also bring on a new era of growth, and we want to be able to support that growth well. It's exciting.
It's exciting.
It's work. It's a tribute to many people doing good work.
All right, our next area is community campus, and community campus, again, is that transition to adult services. And we have conversations ongoing about, as that program has grown, right now we have 44 students at the Western Mall and 17 at Exto Park, so that program's split, looking at how can we bring them all together. So we've had conversations about remodeling this facility at Exto Park and looking at can that support and accommodate that program, but then continuing to look at other options. And so right now we're still looking at other venues that could be a possibility for community campus, and that will continue as we settle on a location. Okay.
I should have put a shameless plug in for the Teacher Pathway Program as being part of the Spanish Immersion Program, so that we build our own group of teachers coming up and through, and we'll continue to do that. We are on to the Whittier process and from the Facility Planning Committee. If you remember in 2018, that was a process that was in place there, that they had funded that to be able to purchase and some of the property, and that was part of the previous bond. That's the only part of the Whittier process that is from that previous bond. And so the timeline that we presented last time is truly to purchase the property and going through, and that's from 24 to 27. In 26, we had finalized the school site and design. So truly trying to finalize that design, and prior to that, we would have to finalize where the school site location would be, and we'll talk about that coming up here. To look at the bond in 2027, begin construction in 2028, and the new school opening in 2030. So there's quite a time range in there, but obviously we have to get those things in place as we go along to be able to realize that in 2030. Part on here that I'll go through and just talk a little bit more about is we did have 3 options that we talked about last time. Mr. Kreider went through and talked about the locations and some of the different things that were advantages or disadvantages of each of those different locations, and then showed that with an overlay of the homes that we were purchasing in that area. And so we'll talk just very quickly on those 3 locations again, and then show you at the end what a recommendation would be at this point in time, and then kind of an overall summary of things. So the first thing that Mr. Kreider had gone through is just some of the houses, and you saw this on the document there that we already have purchased or in the process of purchasing at this point in time. And so you see that, and we're working through to finalize that. That was part of the original plan too in the conversation of that committee in 2018 to look at that block between the football field and the current Whittier. And so that still holds true at this point in time. But some of the other options involve some other land, and we'll talk about that as well. So the first option went through, and if you recall, involved that block in between, but also the block next to it. And so those 2 blocks side by side, and then some of the existing park areas. So all that area in blue is area that we would be working to make purchases on to be able to own that land. The area in green we currently do own is the Sioux Falls School District, and that's a current athletic field, the current parking lot for the staff, and the current school. And the area in blue is what would be purchased if we went with location number 1.
I'm just going to clarify, since we got a couple of questions just publicly. We refer to a church which is not the church that is east behind that field. There's a large church there. There's a smaller home right across the street from existing Whittier where the pointer is, it's got a sign up indicated as a church. We're not sure if it's occupied or not at this point, but it's not the big church behind it.
Other
So
churches
rest assured,
contact-
Lutherans in the neighborhood, not your church.
Other individuals contacted us, were a little concerned about their church, and no, that's not your church. So the next part on there is looking, this would be the layout of that if we did go with option 1, that's where the school would lay out at. Looking at the second location, you can again see the area of green, which is currently Sioux Falls School District property. The second location that was presented by Mr. Kreider would require the purchasing of all that area in blue, except for obviously the existing city park area is still clear to the end of the athletic field, but that other area in blue, and you can see the number of acres and the homes that would require. If you overlaid that, if we did purchase that area, that's what that layout would be for the football field and the school. The third location that was presented to you would involve the area in green again that we currently own, and then the area in blue is what would be purchased. And that's predominantly where we have current purchased homes. And so when you really put those all together, the biggest part of it would be, there's the layout of that, but when you really put it all together, this final slide that Mr. Kreider had shown the group last time, of what's the impact in that area, in that community. As you go through option 1, it's roughly 39 houses in the church. Option 2, 48 houses, would not include that church. Option 3, 29 houses in that church. So which one has the least amount of impact in that area would be option 3. As we go through and discuss that and the layout of things, we really look at the preferred option being option number 3.
Can we just go
Questions?
back to option 1?
Yes, we can.
Does the athletic field need to be redone completely, regardless of where we move it?
I just, it's not really conforming to the size of it. You know, I would recommend that we do it again, and update that.
So clarify that on microphone, Jeff, just so we capture that. If we go with the kind of the newer version of that, does that give a standard track size with the redesign,
A
or is
little
it still middle
oblong
school size?
type of morph to fit into that site that I would say under all options, you would redo the track and also the field house that associates with it. So it would be a conforming, 400 meter track.
Okay.
Good question.
Mhm.
Other questions on those 3 and the land? The big difference between 1, if you see the area in blue where the 18 houses are listed, if we go with option 3, it truly only needs,
Shortens it by
About
about
half of
half a
that
block. Mhm.
and so that's a significant difference in there as we go through and look at that, and yet the layout of everything still fits quite well when you go out the layout of the building. It would move the area of the track, but that's got to be redone anyway. Yep.
Could you also talk about the disruption of the building and how option 3 accommodates
Yep.
the existing building to stay
So-
remain intact?
All 3 will keep the existing building in place until we build the new one. So all 3 will hold that existing building. The difference probably in this process here is the track. So for those couple years in there, we've already discussed plans of where we would have those individuals and they'd be well taken care of for their track and football. So we have a couple options that we've looked at for that. Those could include things with, Howardwood Field or at the high school, but probably Howardwood Field, which I don't think there'd be much argument from middle schoolers being able to utilize some of that. I don't want to say that publicly yet because we haven't talked to a couple people, but we will.
You just did.
I know. So we're going through that whole process of that, but we would make sure that they're well taken care of that way.
Would it take 2 years to build a new track?
That was my push on an estimation, but I don't know.
No, it would take probably, you know, a half year. Depends on, we'd have to demo the building, you know, and this, that's probably going to take as long as building the track.
But maybe not 2 years?
Well,
It won't be 2 years.
Okay.
But I mean.
but it's
from when
going to
we
be out of commission for 2 years
Yeah.
because we're going to be building the building where the track is.
So it'll probably be 2 seasons because we'll be building
Yes.
over the top of them.
Yeah,
And then,
It's more the building than the.
it is. Yeah, so during that time period, we would make sure that they're well taken care of and accommodated.
I think that one of the things that's maybe more unique to this area is the number of potential like walkers and bike riders in comparison to other middle schools. And so I'm just thinking about busing and drop-offs and making sure that there's plenty of that in a neighborhood that's like that tight. Now they probably need less of that because people are walking and there's probably less of a bus, but I just think about that area already having kind of narrow streets and people parking on them and things like that. So I would just want to make sure that we pay really close attention to that because drop-off lines at any school are terrible.
you know,
And so
and this.
whatever
this-
we can do proactively.
You know, I mean, this is just hypothetical.
Yeah.
These are just bubbles, but on this one, we're showing a front drop-off loop in front of the school, and also that whole street to the east, that Fairfax, is all drop-off. Widen it, making space for drop-off, and I think we'll have to make sure that who's ever here in 30
Yes.
and designing this, that's an important part.
Okay.
Other questions or comments?
I think the other thing we had talked about was potentially, and there's nothing set in stone, but having some sort of multi-use part of the school. And so making sure that whatever footprint we select allows us to include that, whether it's some performing arts or whether it's a community center, whatever that one thing is, just making sure that we have enough room as far as acres wise so that we can plan for something unique on that area.
The southwest corner, right by the track, is actually the footprint of what's going on.
Okay.
In McGovern,
Oh,
the
okay.
Boys and Girls Club. So we have a footprint right there, already identified that with square footage would be there. So it does fit very nicely. And I would imagine that they'll be confined a little bit or compacted a little more as the design happens. Because this is based on a 2-story option. If we do a 3-story in the academic wing, we'll have to vet through all that when we design.
There's also, as we talked about a little bit earlier, in that impact that it would be with the movement of potentially the Cleveland Elementary. Do we look at other things that could be incorporated into the academic realm of that would help to support the students that go there? So a lot of good things, especially when we're starting at this point in time, to be able to plan that out, to be able to look at other schools, similar situations across this Midwest or across the nation, just to see what other things have happened there to maybe be able to partner with community members.
We have some really great things that Whittier has been doing programmatically despite not having the ideal space. And so I think there are some things we can enhance if we are able to program well as some additional interest in some other community partnerships that we have kind of in some other ways that are very interested in supporting Whittier too. So I think we have great opportunities, and that's brings us back to why we want to get the timeline nailed down as kind of a formal timeline, because then that's all the work that still has to happen and still has to come through a lot of different things, including with Whittier, and looking at kind of what their dreams are for revisioning what they're already doing really well as well as the space and that they'd like to see. So that's the fun part. Not that this isn't fun, but that's why we need to get this in place.
Any additional questions on that process? The next part here is just looking ahead for the board of what they could look forward to on June 10th. And so just to talk through a little bit of that, And then we can see, depending on what questions or comments come in, as to whether we need additional information and feedback and conversation in that June work session. And so we're looking at the board on June 10th, being able at the school board meeting, the regular school board meeting, to be able to have a vote to affirm the Marcelo LeBeau Elementary School boundary lines for the fall of 2025. That'd be one thing that would bring forward as a vote. And as I said earlier, that would be our preferred option, and it seems to have been well received and accepted, and we've not, with our listening sessions or our online feedback, not had anything to the contrary of that. The second thing would be vote on the site area for construction of the new Whittier Middle School building, so that we can begin to, or continue to move forward through the processes of that to keep everything on a timeline. I realized earlier it said by 2027, I believe, but there's a lot more to it. Once we know the site, then Mr. Kreider and others can start working on what our plan's gonna look like on that. And that's a much longer process than figuring out that site. And so there's quite a few things that would go into that. So at least to vote on what the site area would be so that we know and can be able to begin to build the plans off of that.
And that has typically, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, been part of the facility plan, and that's where that has lived. And so we'll probably bring that as part of a facility plan update that the board would vote on that way.
Questions on those two things? Next part, we'd also bring forward to the board on the June 10th school board meeting for acknowledgements, to take no action on the movement of the Cleveland Elementary School attendance area, moving to the Whittier. We would postpone that or hold that off. That'd be decided at a later point in time. At this point in time, we were looking possibly to hold till 2030 unless something happens with numbers prior to that. We can obviously look at it earlier than that, but at least at this point in time, we'd brought forward to the board that we would be looking to make that move, but to postpone that, so to take no action on that at this time. And so that'd be an acknowledgement, because obviously there's been nothing that's been put into place. The fourth thing would be to bring the board update and acknowledgement of the Spanish immersion programming changes. And those would be as presented in the preferred option that was presented by Dr. Boyson. And that would be brought forward at the board as an acknowledgement as well on June 10th. And then a note on the bottom, we talked about it briefly, but community campus options, that would come at a later date. We're still looking into those in a variety of different options. We've obviously presented the one with the Axtell Park building and using that and reconfiguring things there. We're looking at other options that we could entertain as well and bring those forward to the board at a later date. So that would not be part of the June 10th discussion and determination. Questions or anything there on the process for the June 10th board meeting? Our goal along this whole way is to make sure that there's been plenty of opportunities for people to give feedback and information for the board to be able to ask questions and to make sure that we can get those answered for you in a timely manner so that there is no rush on it, but to also make sure that we have enough time to be able to move things forward. If anything came up between that point in time, we could move it back, but obviously our deadline is that December 1st to be able to have everything in place well before that so we can send out notifications to families. And we believe this falls well within that timeline for us.
Sounds good.
That is the entire presentation.
All right. We do have 4 people that have signed up to comment. They get 3 minutes each. I guess I'll first start by saying, do you all still want to comment? Sometimes it's hard when you don't know what the presentation is that you want to comment. Anybody else? Yeah, so we'll start then with Susie. If you just want to, I know it's fine. You can just tell us your name and address.
Susie Muntz, 1409 South 5th Avenue in Sioux Falls. Just clarifying that this eliminates the need for the immersion families to have to decide their boundaries like originally we had done for middle school. This option 2 and 3.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. I'll just echo what Dr. Nold said, and I think that unfortunately sometimes people feel like we just check the box and go through the motion of asking for feedback, but we really do appreciate and we really do want feedback. And I think that's evidenced by the changes that you guys brought forward today. I know that there were some concerns from Cleveland about the move, and I think finding balance amongst different schools and different programs to really make it the best for multiple different populations of people can be very challenging. And I'm excited for and proud of the work that you guys have done to try to balance that and listen to what people have to say. We've said many times we all want the best for our own kids, and so we're all very passionate about what we request because we want it the best for our kids. And I think in this case, we're able to maybe make offers that we can all feel like we got what was best for our own kids. So I thank you guys for your time on that. Any other questions or comments?
I'll just comment too. I agree, it was helpful, and that's why we get feedback. But it's really interesting over the life of a school district, and as you have the variables change over time, you know, a facility plan for Whittier 5 years ago, there are a lot of things that changed during the course of that. You know, Ben Rifle was in the mix of all this, and we thought the new construction, which is heavy in that area, would generate more students than it has. Well, that buys us a little more time that even a year ago, we probably didn't think that we had. The other thing is, you know, as a school district, you're always trying to be good stewards of resources, and that's teaching resources, people, and FTE, and where we have classrooms positioned that require a teacher. And as you know, workforce issues are still very real, and the realities of then having specialized programs puts, you know, a little extra strain on that, which we're fine right now, but that's another variable that's different. And then we're also trying to be good stewards of our physical resources and where we become overcrowded and where we're undercrowded. And I will say, you know, as we're all out in buildings every week, you can't easily predict right now where growth is happening due to housing fluctuations. We have areas that have been decreasing that this year have started to kind of repopulate and move up again all throughout the year. And then, like I said, we had areas that we thought we would grow really quickly that have slowed down. That just makes that predictability factor a little bit more of a moving target. We have projections, we have some numbers we rely on that are typically pretty stable, but then every now and then you have a little bit different kind of turn in your data that requires us to come back and take another look. That's why we go through that facility plan, that's why we review FTE, and that's why we continue to kind of look at then what does that look like as we plan. But they are difficult decisions, and that's always apparent when you get feedback, because those are the real things of this makes it easier for our family, this makes it harder for our family, or, you know, a student who's made great friends. Those things mean a lot to us because one of our district pillars is well-being. And we know that well-being is when you're doing what you love with the people that you want to be with and the place where you love too. So it's not an easy process, and we appreciate people chiming in, and we are all working towards creating the best picture of what we want to do. So thanks to the board for working through this with us too. We added the acknowledgement factors there because when you've talked about things in a work session enough times and people say, well, why didn't you vote or did you vote? And part of that's for a historical record too, to note where we acknowledged it, where we kind of said, no, this is what we are going to do moving forward. And then we just have clarity for those who are making these decisions 10 years from now going, oh, what did they do? So that helps us with that.
Thank you. All right, anything else for today? No? All right, can I get a motion to adjourn? Second? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you.